Bad Ethics Plays presents The Tale of Johnny Pleasure, Act 2. Hey everybody, it's me again. Johnny is still in his chair. Madge and Babbs approach him.
Oh, hey, I've been doing some thinking about pleasures and pains. After talking with Ned and Ted, I've decided that not all pleasures are created equal. Some types of pleasure are better than others. The pleasure I get from being able to read, for example, is better than the pleasure I get from eating this candy. Oh, get off your high horse, Johnny. Yes, who are you to judge? Pleasure is pleasure, Johnny. You can't claim that the pleasure you get from your precious book is somehow better than the pleasure I get from getting drunk last night. Yee-haw. Now, I may not be much on figuring, Sheriff, but the way I figure is that one type of pleasure is just as good as another. Unless you had lots more of one type of pleasure than another, of course. Of course.
If I am asked what I mean by difference of quality in pleasures, or what makes one pleasure more valuable than another, merely as a pleasure, except it being greater in amount, there is but one possible answer. Of the two pleasures, if there be one to which all or almost all who've had experience of both give a decided preference, irrespective of any moral obligation to prefer it, that is the more desirable pleasure. If one of the two is, by those who are competently acquainted with both, placed so far above the other that they prefer it, even though knowing it to be attended with a greater amount of discontent, and would not resign it for any quantity of the other pleasure of which their nature is capable, we are justified in ascribing preferred enjoyment a superiority in quality. Few human creatures would consent to be changed into any of the lower animals for a promise, the fullest allowance of a beast's pleasures. Oh, that was great. I knew things were going to heat up in the second act, but anyway, this is really getting good. Well, let's see what happens. Look at this. There's 1 gallon of drunk pleasure and 1 gallon of literacy pleasure, the pleasure you get from being able to read, of course. If the amounts are equal, how can we show that one kind of pleasure is higher than another? Jeremy Bentham famously said that pushpin is as good as poetry. And what Bentham meant by that is that there is no difference in the quality of pleasure. There can only be differences in the quantity of pleasure. So Bentham disagreed with Mill. Mill, though, he wants to say that even if the pleasures equal amounts, there can be a difference in quality. In a later video, I compare it with, with plant life. But let me just take chocolate here. Think about the difference between the quality of the best chocolate you can get, let's say chocolate Toblerone thing, versus the quality of chocolate you get from a Dollar Tree Easter bunny. Well, then you can tell which is better quality by tasting it. But how do you tell between pleasures which quality is better? That's the mystery. Mill thinks 1 unit of pleasure A is greater than 1 unit of pleasure B in quality if all or almost all who have experienced both A and B prefer A, but not because of a feeling of peer pressure to prefer it. A is greater than B if a person would not give up the pleasure they get from A for any quantity of the pleasure they get from B. Think of the pleasure you get. Goodness, hornet. Think of the pleasure you get from being able to read a Harry Potter book, or the pleasure you get from reading a Harry Potter book, versus the pleasure you get from bullying a hobo by the train tracks. Now, I know you're not proud of that, but imagine that you kind of enjoyed being mean to this hobo. Would you trade the Harry Potter reading pleasure for 1,000,000 times more pleasure of the bullying hobo pleasure? Mill thinks most people wouldn't. If you have a jury of people, 9 out of 10 will say that the pleasure you get from reading is the greater pleasure. Well, that's how you tell, just same way you tell which chocolate is better. What do the people think? In the same way, which pleasure is better? What do the people think? Also, one little caveat there: the people who you ask need to be non-biased. They can't be pressured to like the Dollar Tree chocolate better because they work at Dollar Tree. Well, in the same way, you don't want to get a case where someone feels pressured to like the bullying pleasure better. Oh, like in that movie It, there was that one mean kid, and then all the other bullies felt pressured to enjoy bullying because that meanest kid was such a bully. So, anyway, can't be because of peer pressure. Anyway, that's what I meant by that. Gosh, this is like the best play, I think. I hate to say it, but these kind of Shakespeare pales by comparison with this thing. I can't wait to see how it turns out in Act 3, but we're ready for another intermission.